Number 10. Bonnie and Clyde. It probably doesn't get any more infamous and more literal than a crime family when talking about Bonnie and Clyde. They were married, they were husband and wife, makes sense. Part of the gangster era in the 1930s America, Bonnie and Clyde were some of the worst crooks you could come across. Responsible for jailbreaks, bank robberies, unaliving police, and just looking nasty while doing it. A real sweet couple. Their days of crime came to an end when police finally caught up with the young dangerous couple and welcomed them with a barrage of bullets. Bonnie and Clyde were not great actors, but after that they did a great Swiss cheese impression. Fought the law, and the law won.
Number 9. The Winter Hill Gang. One of the most successful organized crime groups in American history, the Winter Hill Gang was actually a team of a bunch of Boston area crime groups. The Irish-American group ran around all over Goodwill Hunting Stopping Ground and were best known for fixing horse races. The gang was famously taken over by James J. Whitey Bulger, who is just an absolutely lovely person. We should just tell him to go watch that movie with Johnny Depp. What's it called?
That movie, you know, it's that one.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it's called.
Apparently he does a really good job. The gang disbanded in the late 90s-ish, or at least as far as I know.
Number 8. Lucchese family. This is a list of the worst and most dishonorable families, so there was a good chance that La Cosa Nostra was going to show up here. Organized crime is nothing new in America. Cities like New York and Chicago have a beautiful Italian-American culture, but also the mafia. Don't forget, they're there too. One such is the Lucchese family. The same one featured in Goodfellas. Now go see that movie. That's a classic. I know the title of that one. Go see that one. It's a good one. The family was responsible for enough crimes to make the rap sheet wrap around your head twice. Most famously, however, was the Lufthansa heist. A heist at JFK Airport back in 1978, stealing an estimated $5.7 million. Now remember, keep your mouth shut and never rat on your friends.
Number 7. Camorra. Everyone always talks about Italian-American families, but never forget about the motherland. 1, because they are still around to hurl meatballs at you, if you do, and 2, the meatballs they toss to you are the kind you ain't coming back from. The most successful of the Italian mob families, the Camorra has been around since back in the 19th century, just like awkward first dates. In modern times, they pull in around $4.9 billion per year from all kinds of illegal enterprises, from trafficking firearms to extortion. They got their start offering protection services in the 1800s during Italy's violent political struggles, and they've been killing it ever since. It's kind of a bad joke.
Number 6. The Jesse James Gang. The real-life Wild Wild West bank robber, the man, the myth, the literal legend, Jesse James. Every cowboy stereotype fits here. Facial hair? Check. Rough and rugged persona? Check. Robbing and looting with your favorite pair of 6-shooters? Checkerino. That's right, neighbor. No stagecoach was safe, no lady and her baubles were safe. That wasn't until a man named Robert Ford shot Jesse James. However, I'm of the notion that just because you shot Jesse James, that don't make you Jesse James. Hence why I didn't know who Robert Ford was until I made a very savvy Google search. But we've all heard of Jesse James though, haven't we? Strange how that works.
Number 5. The Medellin Cartel. You ever seen Narcos? Okay then, moving on to the next point. I'm just kidding. Pablo Escobar, Colombia. The Medellin cartel was a joint operation between multiple different Colombian traffickers and was in business from 1972 to 1993 in a huge amount of territory. Colombia, Panama, California, New York, Florida, Peru, the Bahamas, Canada. They were moving literal tons of snow each year at the height of the operation, making around $60 million a day. A day. It became political in its later years, and becoming political always ruins pretty much everything, so.
Number 4. Hell's Angels. As a large white dude, there's something that happens to us when we reach middle age. We get bigger, the bellies hang a little lower, hair grows silver and thinner. Our skin begins to darken from years of neglect and binge drinking in the sun, while tanning with cigarettes. Yes, that's right, it's time to buy a motorcycle, says the little voice in our heads. What? No, I'm not going through a midlife crisis. This is something said by all Hell's Angels members, or your dad, or your uncle, at one point. Despite being a fun weekend club for dads and uncles to ride bikes and all the good stuff they do, the club sadly has more police investigations than a nefarious motorcycle club that has ulterior motives. Yeah, it's not good. It's not all good stuff. Unaliving, smuggling, well, you get the point here. I'd be here all day listening all the naughty stuff. At least I'm not insecure about my aging though. I wonder how much a Corvette is.
Number 3. The Chicago Outfit. The Chicago outfit was founded in 1910 by Big Jim Colosimo, but its main first leaders were Johnny Torrio and none other than this one guy, you might have heard of him, Al Capone. When they first cropped up, the South Side Gang was fighting gang wars over distribution of alcohol during the Prohibition, but they've moved on to bigger and better things. You know, cheerful stuff like loan sharking, illegal gambling, extortion, political corruption, and that kind of wholesome activity. The outfit has been one of the most powerful, violent, and largest unified criminal organizations in the Midwest of the US.
Number 2, Oil Baron. John D. Rockefeller, the richest American, the CEO's CEO, the owner of Standard Oil, but more importantly, the first oil baron and really the first man to own a monopoly on the oil industry. Yeah, that's right, I'm throwing a little corporate crime your way. I was gonna put Adam on the list here as a joke, but he didn't want me to bring up his jail time.
Hey!
Nah, I'm just kidding, he didn't go to jail, but he should be arrested though. For being so gosh darn cute, right? Anyways, all joking aside, John D. Rockefeller's wealth was impressive. Today, with inflation, it would sit somewhere in the hundreds of billions. My god. Yes, the family still has the wealth, and no, sadly, I'm not related. Why I bring him up is because laws were created after this manipulation of the oil industry, and the reasons for is absurd wealth. They were created because of him. That's insane. Dude's got a whole square in New York. I can't even afford a closet at those prices. Oh man, someone adopt me.
Number 1, the Cray twins. Reggie and Ronnie Cray. It's the Cray twins, innit? These identical twin brothers were the heads of crime in the East End of London, England in the 1950s and most of the 1960s. They were intermingled with politicians and entertainers through their nightclubs. People like Frank Sinatra and Judy Garland. With friends like that, you're bound to be a celebrity yourself. That doesn't seem helpful though when it comes to being a criminal though. Especially when one of you is literally insane. The Cray twins ran the organization known as the Firm, which was involved in crimes like armed robbery, arson, protection rackets, and assault. All the stuff that Andrew does in his spare time. Hey! I am being held against my will. Please call the authorities. Just kidding, he's great, he's great, he's great.
Number 10, Bonnie and Clyde. They kind of wrote the book on couples doing bad things, where if a bad couple happens to make headlines, they could be described as a real Bonnie and Clyde, a modern Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow were as thick as thieves, 2 peas in a pod. Merciless crooks that formed a gang in the early 1930s and wreaked havoc across middle America by robbing banks and exercising their Second Amendment a little too liberally. They were becoming a real thorn in the side for law enforcement. To make matters worse, they were becoming somewhat idolized for their crimes by some of the public. Not good. However, not even a Ford V8 could help them outrun the law for too long, as one day in 1934, it saw the young couple ambushed by agents. And by agents, I mean they turned the car and the crooks into Swiss cheese. A lot of blam blam going on, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't good. Number 9, Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. Despite Canada being a majestic land full of moose, mounties, and rivers of maple syrup and politeness, it's not all fine and dandy up here, folks. Nope. We have our fair share of whack jobs too. Take for example Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka, a Canadian couple who in the early 90s took part in some heinous crimes, including the de-lifing of Carla's own sister. Ooh, and maybe even some sexual related crime. It was naughty, it was bad. When it came down to the trial, Paul was going away for a very long time. Nothing was going to change that. However, Carla got the plea deal of a lifetime and got a fraction of the time compared to Paul. However, videotapes found after the case show that Carla was much more involved than previously thought and would have given her a sentence much closer to Bernardo, maybe even the same. She's currently a free woman. Gross. Number 8, Charles Manson. Okay, this one isn't so much a couple as it is like a throuple or like a grouple. Lots of people intertwined. Anyway, just a weird group of hippies. But Charles Manson was involved, romantically speaking, with his family members or cult or whatever you want to call it, rather. You can't get much more scandalous than Manson. The Manson family took refuge at Spawn Ranch, an abandoned ranch that had been used as a film lot in the past, located in sunny California, Los Angeles. The family often experimented with mind-altering substances, the same ones that made the Beatles the Beatles. Unfortunately, it wasn't all fun-loving and vegan commune happy happiness, brother, at Spawn Ranch as the family became involved in numerous criminal activities, which eventually involved in the de-lifing of an up-and-coming movie star, Sharon Tate. You ask your mom and dad about her, they'll tell you, they'll remember. If you've ever seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, then you'd also understand. I try to relate things, make it more relatable for you, but ask your mom and dad, they'll tell you about the 60s. Number 7, Susan and James Carson. Susan and James both had some troubled backgrounds. Can't have a criminal with that one, really. They fell in love and, well, they fell in love with the same illicit substance that made the Rolling Stones, the Rolling Stones. They changed their last name to Bear and, well, it just gets worse after this point. God had written letters to them to do so. Eventually, they declared themselves witch hunters and began a spree of violent crimes. Because that's what you do. The bodies and evidence kept piling up and they kept disappearing. A manifesto was eventually found calling for the assassination of then President Ronald Reagan and late night comedy legend Johnny Carson. No relation. They were sentenced to life and remained suspects in a bunch of unsolved cases. Ooh, I don't like that. That's gross. Number 6, the Rosenbergs. 1950s America. What a beautiful place. Imagine, if you will, you have a suburb with green grass, white picket fences, and a starter home. Dad buries his PTSD from the war and takes out his anger on the family sometimes, even violently. Mom is a stay-at-home mom who's on so many prescriptions she's forced to lay down during the day with a vodka martini just to get her strength back from a headache. Oof. All while under the threat of atomic annihilation. Oh, America the brave, America the beautiful. Except the biggest thing every American feared back then was actually communists. Yeah, I know, right? Who would have thought? Communists coming to take over because they threatened the great American way of life. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg looked just like any other couple you'd find in the suburbs, except they were Soviet spies. Spies that aided a group that was leaking atomic secrets to the Soviets, allowing the Soviets to have a nuclear program years before the Americans suspected them of having one. Both de-lifed by the state after being found guilty. However, Ethel wasn't as guilty as previously thought and could have received a lighter sentence. Oops. Our bad. Oh, she's innocent? You know what I mean? The flip the switch. Oh, dude, I already flipped the switch, dude. Too late. Number 5, Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. Does this really need an introduction? That's all anybody's talking about right now. But Johnny Depp, one of America's greatest actors and teenage heartthrob on 21 Jump Street. Am I right, ladies? God, he was cute in that. Amber Heard, being some lady who had a breakout role as a fish lady and Aquaman. I haven't seen Aquaman, that's just what it looks like to me. And all of this in one of the messiest divorces ever publicized. Yikes. This trial is happening as I speak. Probably right now. It's happening right now. And we are slowly reaching the outcome. However, all I'll say is when two gorgeous millionaires marry each other and you mix in some illicit substances, well, are we really surprised this didn't work out? Johnny Depp we're talking about here. If I ever get rich and famous, I will never treat my loved ones like that, or any of the amazing people that follow me. I love you guys. You're the best. Thanks so much for watching all the time, guys. I love you. And checking me out on my own socials. Oh, shucks. You guys are the best. Number 4, French royalty. Imagine being so down bad with your husband that it starts a revolution and then inspires other European nations to be free from monarchical tyranny. Marie Antoinette and King Louis XVI were the last kings and queens of France. If crimes against humanity don't count, then I don't know what does. People had no rights, even less rights than truckers in Ottawa. Oh, that's the worst. It was a very interesting time in history. By the end, the Castile had been sieged, heads were on pikes, and the national razor was brought out just to show how democratic a new government can be. Next time, be sure to share food at the bread table. That's all I gotta say about that. Number 3, Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Talk about scandal. Oh, if we had social media back then, this would have been everywhere. A regular Romeo and Juliet. And a little bit of Bonnie and Clyde too, actually. Cleopatra had a few Roman men wrapped around her finger. It was politics, and she was playing the long game. The star-vexed lovers were playing with two empires, some of the largest at the time. However, their political string-pulling and bedsheet wrestling would come to a tragic end. Cleopatra and Mark Antony would never be around to see their empires fall after some betrayal, and both of them having their lives taken away. They did some naughty things in between that, though. They weren't very nice. Number 2, Mustache Man and Blonde Lady. Hey. Even the biggest, baddest guys in history get lonely. Ava Braun, Mustache Man's main squeeze and wife right up until the Red Army came a-knockin'. Oh boy, they came a-knockin'. We all know what he's guilty of, and honestly, I think she's kinda guilty too. We've all seen the lost German footage of the boys making plans at the Eagle's Nest, and there she is. I'd say that doesn't look too good. I'm not a lawyer, or I am, but it doesn't look too good. It's kind of like if Adam and I were on an episode of Cops, and we got pulled over in a car together. The footage made it to the show, which means there's something in the car. It all depends on who wants to take the blame. Otherwise, you're guilty by association, or an accessory to the fact. So, yeah, I think she is kind of guilty too. Yep. If you weren't guilty, you would have gone down in the bunker with him. You know what I'm saying, Chris? You know what I'm saying? Number 1, Mussolini and partners, because he had more than one. A lot of people think Mustache Man did it on his own, but the truth is he had a lot of help from his fascismo friend in Italy, Mussolini. From organizing his fascist beatdown gangs to the brown shirts and all the war crimes in between, Mussolini had a hand in it. He showed him the way. Mussolini not only did all this while married, but kept the company of unsavory mistresses. It's a good thing he controlled the media because people wanted to say some bad things about him and his most favorite mistress, Claretta. His wife Rachel stayed with him up until the end when him and Claretta were brutally unalived by citizens fed up with his chin, he had a chin thing, and his fascismo government, multiple crimes against humanity, and cheated on his wife. You know, we know you knew better. Come on, let's be honest. Number 10, middle school education. You're born, you go to school, you get educated, you get a job, you live, and then you pass away. That's life. It sounds boring, but it's about the people and things you do along the way that make it worthwhile. Well, what do you think the qualifications for Mafia Don are? I mean, where do you gotta go to take that class? What's a guy like me gotta do to be a boss around here? Is it a class I take online? Well, if we're to go by Alphonse Capone's middle school education, well, then that's all you would need, actually. Well, in that case, I should be a gazillionaire because I have my grade 10. Sadly, it doesn't work that way. He left school at a young age and fell into the wrong crowd, which is a nice way of saying he was involved in a street gang at a very young age. Number 9, Scarface. Yes, Scarface. It was one of his most infamous nicknames. Why? Well, because of a cut that he earned during a brawl. Was it a rough and tough showdown between him and a rival mobster? Or maybe it was a desperate attempt to escape police custody? Well, actually, it turns out it was a petty fight in a brothel. A fight that Al Capone instigated himself by calling one of the female patrons by some crude language, if you will. It was enough to start a physical altercation and have him getting slashed across the face, earning him the nickname and the reputation for being the toughest mobster in town. And that he was. Number 8, St. Valentine's Day. This is where it all went south. Up until Valentine's Day 1929, Capone was untouchable. There had been attempts to take him down before that, but all efforts proved to be futile. The main reason for that was corruption. Capone had so many cops and judges in his pocket, it would honestly make you sick. Seriously, it's a crazy percentage of them. It's insane. Add that to his public image of a luxurious and exuberant partier, and well, yeah, he was untouchable. However, Valentine's Day changed his public image, as the crime committed that day proved to be too violent for even his great public image. 7 members of a rival gang were turned into Swiss cheese with a cheese grater, if you will, when his gang dressed up as police officers and mowed down the enemy gang. Using his hurting public image, law enforcement were able to change everything. It was kind of the beginning of the end for him. Number 7, tax evasion. So when you're the biggest and baddest criminal in American history, what's your downfall? Maybe it's just like Tony Montana in the 80s Scarface. Well, no, not even close. Great movie though. Al Capone was brought up on charges of tax evasion, and that's what got him. Not any of his violent crimes, unaliving, conspiring, racketeering, gambling charges, bootlegging, smuggling, property damage, you name it. The list goes on. There was a lot. None of that. He didn't go to jail for any of that. So, like I've said before, and I'll always say it, the most ruthless criminal in American history, maybe even world history, went to jail for tax evasion. The mob life is tough, but the IRS, they're tougher. Number 6, Alcatraz. I left my heart in San Francisco. And her name is Alcatraz, maximum security facility. You can't go without checking out Alcatraz. She built a prison on an existing US fort in San Francisco Bay. The idea being, since it sat in cold and rough waters, that the prison was inescapable. Now go ahead and Google Alcatraz escape and you'll see how well that went. When we want something bad enough, we'll just do it. It's human nature. Well, that being said, this was a prison you couldn't escape up until that certain date, and it would make sense to send your most ruthless and awful criminals there. So that's what they did, one of which was old Scarface himself. He spent a few years there before being released and retiring to a mansion he purchased in Florida. However, it wasn't all great. His time at Alcatraz was rough, and his life at his mansion wasn't much better as he was suffering from syphilis-related mental illness. Makes you go crazy. Number 5. Hey, shut up! Back to Capone's younger days. Now, like I've said before, I was a good boy. I was a good kid, seriously. I know some of you folks out there don't believe me, but I really was. I did all my homework, I tried extra hard in school, and I always listened to my parents. Right up until I was about a teenager. And then, things, you know how it goes. Mom, I'm fine, just leave me alone! God! Anyway, part of the reason why Capone left school was because he wasn't such a great student. Not a role model, as my teachers would put it. The teachers wanted me to be a role model, but I was too busy being a class clown. And can you blame me? No, you can't. However, one time Capone wasn't having what his teacher was saying and slapped her. Oh boy. Now, mind you, this was a long time ago, so they dealt with it the best way they could by letting him leave school and join a street gang like previously mentioned. That's great, yeah, let the kid go, that's good. I'm sure great things will happen with him. I'm sure that's not gonna be the most ruthless criminal in American history right there. No, he's good, that guy. Yep. Number 4, bootlegging. Okay, so take something everyone uses every day, whether it's recreation or a problem, that's up to your family members, but take something that was perfectly legal and then overnight make it illegal. Do you hear that sound? Yes, that's the sound of a black market booming. When Prohibition made the sale of alcohol illegal in the 1920s, bootleggers like Al Capone simply capitalized on the crisis. And trust me, ask your dad, not having any beer? That's a crisis. Making dry mouths very wet. Since the booze was illegal, this made the prices for moving it shoot up like, well, your dad's blood pressure when you crash the Corvette. Years of violent crimes and smuggling made the man very, very rich. Quite possibly even more than Rockefeller, who was the richest man at the time. Big mistakes. Just feels like this guy just capitalized on mistakes, it's kinda crazy. Number 3, wealth. Capone became quite the businessman. His bootlegging and smuggling was more than enough to make the man wealthy, but like any investor will tell you, diversify, diversify, diversify. And diversify he did. Capone found himself owning not only the most successful bootlegging syndicate in Chicago, and even other cities, but also a collection of brothels, gambling rackets, and some other savvy investments. Even some around here in the Canadian area, you know what I'm saying? We had something to do with it too. Oops, sorry. When all totaled, his net worth was estimated to be around $105 million US. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $1.5 billion today. Now, just to put that into perspective, a loaf of bread, eggs, and some milk, some classic stuff your mom would send you to the grocery store for, would cost you about $1.45 total. And he's got millions. Whew, that's how you keep pockets lined and people smiling. Number 2, soup kitchen. This is just too weird not to believe, but when you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense. Al Capone, ruthless criminal and violent maniac, opened soup kitchens to feed those who were less fortunate at the time. Who would have thought? I know. Yes, now those people needed it. It was the early 30s and these were tough times because of the Great Depression. And he did do some good. He did. However, that doesn't make up for his crimes and is really just an effort to improve his public image. To the people, it looked great, and to those hungry, starving men in the lineup, yeah, they really needed it. But to police, it sounded more like, hey, you wouldn't arrest a guy with glasses, would ya? Or it takes care of sick puppies and manages a soup kitchen for the poor, would ya? Come on, fellas. Number 1, Snorky. Last but certainly not least, his preferred nickname was Snorky. Not Boss, the Don, the Godfather, the Big Pepperoni Pizza, the Chief, the Paisano, the King of Gabagool, or any other New Jersey Italian American stereotypes. To us, Snorky might sound silly, but back then it meant more along the lines of a sharp dresser or well-dressed. Ooh, yeah. And for a man of his wealth and reputation, he certainly was. He made 3-piece suits and fedoras look good long before neckbeards and Discord mods made them cringe. Ooh, I'm going to federal prison for tax evasion, my Discord kittens.